A kata is something you practice, not something you watch. Read the lesson, write the code yourself, then review what you wrote. This video is the reference you come back to afterwards. A model can produce this code in seconds, and the reason to write it by hand is to keep the judgment that tells you whether the code is any good. There is no conditional syntax in JSX. There is no if tag and there is no show when attribute, and none of the 5 patterns in this lesson are React features. They are all ordinary JavaScript expressions that happen to evaluate to something React can render. Once you see it that way, the patterns stop being things to memorize and become a single question. What does this expression evaluate to, and what does React do with that value? One of them evaluates to something you did not intend and puts a 0 on the screen in front of your users. That 1 is at the end. The first pattern is the one people skip, and it is often the right answer. Work out what to render before the return statement, put it in a variable, and then render the variable. Plain if and else, no cleverness. This is what you want the moment the decision needs more than one line or an early exit or a comment explaining why. JSX has no if because it does not need one. Everything above the return is normal JavaScript and you can use all of it. The demo here toggles between two states and swaps the message with it. The code underneath is the shape to copy a variable declared before the return, assigned in a branch, and then dropped into the markup in braces. The important part is what that variable holds. It is JSX sitting in an ordinary JavaScript variable being passed around like any other value. That is the idea that makes the rest of this lesson obvious. The ternary operator is the one you will use most, and it is the right tool for exactly one job, two alternatives, one of which always renders condition, then the value when true, then the value when false. Because it is an expression rather than a statement, it can sit directly inside the markup, which is what if cannot do. The trap is nesting. A ternary inside a ternary inside a ternary is technically fine and unreadable by the next person, including you. When you reach the second level, that is the signal to go back to pattern 1 or to pull the branch out into its own component. 3 buttons on screen pick a role and the panel underneath changes with it. The condition is a strict equality check against the string admin, and the 2 branches are the 2 panels. Notice that both branches are real markup, several elements each wrapped in parentheses. That is what the parentheses are for here. They are not part of the ternary. They are how you give the operator a multi-line expression without JavaScript deciding the statement ended at the line break. Use and when there is nothing to show in the false case. Condition on the left, markup on the right, and if the condition is true, you get the markup. It reads like a sentence, and it is the shortest pattern here, which is why it is also the one that bites. The reason is what? And actually does. It is not a Boolean operator that returns true or false. It returns the left-hand value when that value is falsy and the right-hand value otherwise. So the thing React ends up rendering is whatever the left side was. Hold on to that sentence for the end of the lesson. The demo adds notifications to a list, and the block appears once there is at least one. The condition is the length compared against 0, not the length on its own, and that is deliberate. Compare it with the badge in the playground at the end of this lesson, which does exactly the same job with the comparison left out, and watch what appears on screen when the list is empty. Once there are 3 or more outcomes, both the ternary and the chain of AND stop being readable. A switch statement above the return handles it, returning the markup for each case with a default for the one you did not think of. The alternative on screen is an object whose keys are the states and whose values are the markup, and then you index into it. That version is compact and it removes the branching entirely, which is worth having when the set of states is fixed and known. Both are better than 4 nested ternaries. Loading, error, and success. 3 states, and every data fetching component you write will have these 3 plus an idle one before the request starts. Look at how each state gets its own complete piece of markup rather than one block with pieces switched on and off inside it. That separation is what makes the error state easy to design properly instead of being a red line bolted onto the success layout. A component can return null and React renders nothing at all for it. No wrapper, no empty element, nothing in the DOM. This is how a modal, a tooltip, or a banner is written. The parent always renders the component, and the component itself decides whether it is on screen. That is worth preferring over wrapping it in a condition at the call side, because the rule about when it shows lives inside the thing it applies to, rather than being repeated at every place that uses it. The modal on screen is that pattern. Its first line checks whether it is open and returns null if it is not, so everything below that line can assume it is visible. One thing to be clear about, returning null unmounts it. This is not hiding with a style rule. The component state goes, and when it comes back fresh. Most of the time, that is what you want from a modal, and when it is not, that is the moment to lift the state up to the parent instead. The list on screen is the short version of everything above. And for show and hide, ternary for 2 alternatives. Switch or a lookup object for more than 2. Never nest ternaries deeply. Pull a complicated condition out into its own component. And the one in the middle, which is the reason this lesson has a bug demo attached, do not use and with the number on the left. None of these are React syntax. They are JavaScript expressions in braces, and React renders whatever they evaluate to. It ignores true, false, null, and undefined, and it renders everything else it can, which includes 0. Use if statements above the return when the logic is complex, the ternary for 2 outcomes, and for 1, a switch or a lookup for many, and null when a component should not be there at all. This is the bug running. A notification badge with a count that starts at 0, a button to add 1, and a button to clear. The last line uses and with the count on the left, which reads as if there is a count, show the message. Add a notification and it works exactly as intended. Now clear it and a 0 appears on the screen. Not the message, not nothing, the digit 0 rendered as text in your interface. Here is why, and it follows from what? And actually does. When the left side is falsy and returns the left side, 0 is falsy, so the expression evaluates to 0, and React is handed the number 0 to render. React skips true, false, null, and undefined, and 0 is none of those. It is a perfectly good thing to put on a page, so React puts it on the page. The operator did the right thing, JavaScript did the right thing, React did the right thing, and your users can see a stray 0. The fix is to put a real boolean on the left. Count greater than 0 evaluates to true or false and nothing else. So the expression is either the markup or false, and React ignores false. This version also adds the empty case as a second line with an explicit check for count equal to 0, which is the honest way to write it. 2 conditions, 2 outcomes, both visible. The same care applies to any value that can be 0 or an empty string. The habit worth building is that the left-hand side of and is always a comparison, never a bare value. The last variant is all of it in one component, so you can read the patterns against each other. It opens with the state that drives the demos and a status value that moves between loading, error, and success. Then the sections. The ternary section switches between 2 panels on a boolean. The end section shows a block only when a list has something in it, with the comparison written out. The switch section maps a status string to a different piece of markup for each case, with a default at the end. Read down the file and notice that all 3 do the same job, and the only thing that changes is how many outcomes there are. That is the whole decision. Count the outcomes, then pick the pattern. The model to keep is one sentence. Braces in JSX hold an expression, and React renders whatever it evaluates to, skipping only true, false, null, and undefined. Every pattern in this lesson follows from that, and so does the bug. 0 is not on the skip list. Next time you write and in your markup, look at the left-hand side and ask whether it is a boolean. If it is not, make it one. The kata is the part that matters. Open the lesson, write the code yourself, then read back what you wrote and judge it. The link is in the description, and that practice is what keeps the skill yours.